Hi everyone, welcome back to Dave's Math Channel. I'm your host David Tare, and tonight I'm gonna talk about how we might be able to communicate with aliens using math and why math is important in trying to communicate with intelligent extraterrestrial civilizations if they're out there, and I believe they are. And the main organization that's been trying to do this for the last 50 or 60 years is SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. They're located in New Mexico, I think near Los Alamos, and they haven't discovered any definite extraterrestrial civilizations yet. Although there was a big thing called the WOW signal, I think in the late 70s. It's not really definitive whether it was an extraterrestrial signal, although it seemed to be. But anyway, they've been trying to do this for the last 50 years or so. And how are they doing it? Well, the big proponent of how to try to communicate with aliens was this guy here, Carl Sagan. He was a very famous cosmologist, and he wrote a very important book. He actually wrote several important books. And one thing we did before that was he actually was involved in getting this plaque put on. Well, first he made a record called "The Sounds of Earth." This went on the Pioneer satellite, one of the Pioneer satellites that actually left the solar system. It was the first man-made object to leave the solar system. It was built, I think, in 1973, and he put this record on it called "The Sounds of Earth." And he recorded some important sounds from the Earth, I guess mostly sounds of nature. I think he also put a little bit of Chuck Berry in there. It's kind of funny because I think that was the only rock and roll he put in there. And I remember on Saturday Night Live, so they had a joke where the aliens respond to this and they said, send us more Chuck Berry. I thought that was hilarious. But anyway, yeah, he put the sounds of Earth. And what else did he put? I think this was even more important. He had a plaque on the Pioneer satellite on the outside, and this plaque is really important. I'm not going to go into it in detail, but he actually designed this plaque with a specific purpose of having to try to teach the aliens. If an extraterrestrial civilization actually had found the Pioneer satellite venturing through space, they would have seen this plaque. And you can see some things on this plaque on the right. He shows a picture of a man and a woman, and he tried to make them look kind of neutral, kind of a mixture of all races, all ethnicities on Earth. He also made them naked. Got a little bit of controversy for that, but he wanted to make sure the aliens knew what we look like without our clothes on, I guess, which kind of makes sense. And he also has a lot of other information in this plaque. If you notice on the bottom, there's pictures of all the sun and the 9 planets. I guess Pluto was considered a planet back then. So he has the kind of the size of each planet to scale, and the other stuff on this plaque. I'm not going to go into detail by it, but if you look at the top left, you can see these two circles up here. That's actually very important. These are supposed to be two hydrogen atoms, and there's a line called the hydrogen line. It actually I think we have a slide on that later. Well, let me try to get to it. Um, yeah. Oh, here it is. So I just want to explain the hydrogen lines. You're supposed to imagine this hydrogen atom, and it has, of course, a proton in the middle and an electron orbiting it. But there's actually two states the electron can have. It can be spin up or spin down. The spin can be either parallel or anti-parallel to the spin of the proton. And it turns out that there's a slight energy difference between these two states. And when you go from the state where they're parallel to the state where they're anti-parallel, the state where they're anti-parallel has a slightly lower energy. So when it transitions from the parallel to the anti-parallel state, it releases a photon with a very specific energy, very specific wavelength, 21 centimeters. And so that's universal. That's a nice thing about it because hydrogen is the most common element in the universe. I think something like 99% at least well, maybe not that much. I think 93% of the observable universe is made of hydrogen. And hydrogen is all throughout the universe, and we need hydrogen, obviously. So any alien civilization we discover is going to have hydrogen, and these are supposed to be two hydrogen atoms, and he kind of sets the scale for, I guess, length by the length of the wavelength of the hydrogen. This hydrogen line, and he uses that length as a kind of a unit for scaling everything else. And if you look at the part on the left in the middle, these are sort of supposed to be where the planets are. I think these rays going off in the center is supposed to be the sun, and then you got 9 rays going out from, and those are the 9 planets, or the 9 known planets at that time. And he has their distances in units of the hydrogen spectrum, so that they kind of know how far the planets are from the sun and where they are, so that they'll know where the sun is if they find this, and they'll know what we look like. And he also has an arrow going to the third planet, which is us, Earth, and he even has an arrow showing a picture of the Pioneer satellite. So if the aliens can figure all this stuff out, which they should be able to do because he gave them kind of a primer for the whole thing, uh, then they would know where to find us, what we look like, and where we are, and if they come and communicate with us if they feel like it. So far, nobody has. But anyway, I think it's pretty clever. So he was very serious about encountering extraterrestrial beings, and um, but anyway, that's just one thing he did. And he also, towards the end of his life, he wrote a very famous novel. I guess he wasn't just a scientist, he also wrote a piece of science fiction. I read this novel. It's one of the favorite books I've ever read in my life. I'd say this and 2010, the sequel to 2001 by Arthur C. Clarke, are probably my two favorite books I've ever written. And interesting, they both involve encountering extraterrestrial life. So I guess I'm just really interested in that subject. And where does math come into all this? Well, I think I explained a little bit with all the scales and stuff, but it's actually a little more fundamental than that. I mean, and they explain this really well in the novel Contact. I'll get to that in a minute. But one thing that's really important in trying to communicate with aliens is prime. Well, here they also made it into a movie. So it was first a novel that came out, I think, in 1985, and then they made it into a movie in the 90s starring Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey. Really excellent movie. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. I don't think the movie was quite as good as the book. They left some pretty critical things out of the movie that I think were really good in the book, but it's an excellent story, and it's also an excellent movie. But anyway, yeah, I want to mention prime numbers. So here's where the math kind of comes in. So why are prime numbers important in trying to communicate with aliens? Well, I think the reason they are is because primes are universal. I mean, math is universal. That's kind of the ultimate point I want to make in this video. Math, I think even Galileo said that God was a mathematician, or that math is the language of the sciences. And that kind of makes sense to me because, I don't think math is invented. I think math is discovered. I mean, the whole universe obeys the same mathematical principles. Primes are universal. I mean, primes are just numbers that have only two factors, namely one and themselves. One's not a prime by convention, but any aliens that exist anywhere in the universe, they're going to discover the same prime numbers as us because they're universal. They don't depend on the base. Notice they're written in base 10 here. But if I'd written them in base 12, they'd still be the same numbers. They just have different representations. So they're universal. And why is that important in trying to communicate with aliens? Well, imagine that an alien civilization was trying to send a signal to us, and they wanted to make sure we knew it was from an intelligent source. How would they do that? Well, it's pretty easy with prime numbers. Just send a signal based on primes. Send like a beacon and have the beacons say send maybe 2 pulses first, then 3 pulses, then 5 pulses, then 7 pulses, and so on. Go through all the prime numbers. Why would we be pretty sure that's from an extraterrestrial civilization, not just a natural process? Well, there's no known natural process that produces primes. I mean, primes are kind of weird because primes are mathematical, but they don't seem to be natural, and they don't really have any. any easily recognizable pattern, but they do have a very precise mathematical definition. That's why I think they'd be really useful in trying to communicate with aliens, because we could send a signal involving primes, and if another extraterrestrial civilization discovered it, they'd probably be pretty sure it came from an intelligent source, and the same with us if we discovered them. And actually, that is used in the story Contact. I don't want to give away too much of the story, but I guess the only other thing I want to say about it, this is the first level. So in Contact, it's a little bit of a spoiler alert. What they do, what the aliens do, who actually do communicate with us, is that they have a message they send. There's four levels to the message, and the first level is just a broadcast of the first, several prime numbers. I think it was all the primes up to 101. Here I have them up to 100. It doesn't really make much difference, but so that was kind of their way of saying hello, like we're intelligent, listen to us. But actually, it was more to the message. There were three other levels. The second level, it was actually a very alarming level. What happens then is they find there's more to the message, and the next thing they discover is a recording of a re-recording of Adolf Hitler, his announcement of the Olympics in Berlin in 1936. And of course, when they first discover that, they think, "Oh God, this is horrible." They broadcast back Hitler. Maybe they want to take us over, but actually, what all it was the first strong enough TV broadcast from Earth to reach space. So they thought it was our first broadcast. And but how did they even broadcast that message? That also involves primes. So suppose you wanted to send a picture to an extraterrestrial civilization. How would you do that? Well, you'd have to make sure the dimensions of the picture involve two primes, like 31 by 41, for instance. Those are both prime numbers. If you multiply them together, you get 1,271, which is a product of two primes. So if you sent a message consisting of 1,271 bits, one way you might want to try to put it together is factor 1020, 1271 into 31 times 41. Those are primes, and then you could recreate an image with those dimensions, and then the image could show a picture of something or other. And that's actually what they did in the movie. They had a three-dimensional, three primes, because it was a recording, which also involves a third dimension of time. And they just factored a number that was a product of three primes. Two of those primes, I guess, indicated the dimensions of the images, and the third was how long it was, and so they were able to put that together into video broadcast, which they were able to play. There was more to the message after that. I don't want to go into it, but ultimately the fourth level was how to build a machine to reach the aliens, which they actually do. I don't want to give any more of the story away. It's an excellent story. I just recommend you read it or watch the movie. But it kind of, Carl Sagan was really a genius on all this. I mean, he knew what we needed to do to make contact with aliens. And here's just a picture I already showed you of the 21 centimeter hydrogen line. And physics is also important. I guess that's the last thing I want to say. So not just math, but a nice thing about physics is that, well, physics is real for one thing. It's science. Math is just kind of abstract. It's not science. But there are physical constants, and this is just one of them. The 21 centimeter line of hydrogen. But there's more basic physical constants like well, there's the Bohr radius of the atom too. That's another important one because we can use that as a unit of length if we're trying to communicate with aliens. Every hydrogen atom in the universe has the same um, Bohr radius, and you can actually calculate it in terms of other physical constants. Here's a formula for it. It turns out it's about 53 picometers. Very, very small, but you can calculate it, and every hydrogen atom in the universe has the same size, so you could use that as a distance scale. Not only that, but there's kind of three what are considered the most basic physical constants in the universe. There's the speed of light, c. There's the universal gravitational constant, capital G, and there's the reduced Planck's constant, h bar. And if you use these three constants together, you can actually come up with a system of natural units called Planck units. every measurable quantity, like length, mass, and time, can be derived in terms of these Planck units, and we could use those units as a basis for our agreed system of units. So, it's kind of nice that we have these physical constants, which we can also use as a means of communicating with aliens. So, I think the main point I was trying to make in this video is that if we do want to talk to aliens, the way to do it is with math. Think of math as a universal language. It's kind of a language of the universe. And it's not only the language of maybe communicating with aliens, but it's also the language of science and it's the language of computer programming. I mean, ultimately everything reduces to math. And I think that's what's really beautiful. That's one thing that's really beautiful about math. It's universal. So anyway, that's my video on how to communicate with aliens with math. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.